My sister-in-law tried to sabotage my marriage by spreading lies about me cheating, so we cut her off completely. My name is Kara, and I'm 29 years old. I've been married to Robert, who is 32, for 3 years now. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party 5 years ago. At first, I wasn't sure about him because he seemed a bit shy, but as we talked more that night, I realized how kind and funny he was. We started dating soon after and got married 2 years later. Robert's family has always been a mixed bag. His parents are nice enough, but they can be a bit old-fashioned sometimes. They weren't thrilled when Robert and I moved in together before getting married, but they came around eventually. Robert has a younger brother, Tom, who's 25 and still figuring out what he wants to do with his life. Tom and I get along well, he's easygoing and fun to be around. But then there's Melissa, Robert's older sister. She's 34 and has been a source of tension in our lives from the beginning. When I first met her, I thought she seemed friendly enough, but something felt off. She was always very touchy-feely with Robert, which I found a bit strange for siblings. I later learned that Melissa had practically raised Robert when they were younger because their parents worked long hours. This created a strong bond between them, but it also meant that Melissa felt like she had a special hold over Robert. As I got to know Melissa better, I started to see how she acted like she knew what was best for everyone, including me. She'd give unsolicited advice about my career, my clothes, even my haircut. At first, I tried to take it as her way of being helpful, but it started to grate on me after a while. Melissa is the type of person who always has to be the center of attention. At family gatherings, she's the one telling all the stories, making all the jokes, and generally holding court. Everyone seems to hang on her every word. I don't mind people enjoying the spotlight sometimes, but Melissa takes it to another level. She'll interrupt others or change the subject if she feels like she's not getting enough attention. What's worse is that she has a habit of subtly putting people down. She'll make comments that seem innocent on the surface but have a sharp edge to them. With me, it started small. She'd say things like, "Oh, you're wearing that top again? I guess it must be comfortable." Or she'd taste my cooking and say, "It's good." For a beginner. These comments always left me feeling a bit off balance. As time went on, Melissa's behavior towards me got worse. She started criticizing me more openly, especially in front of Robert. She'd make comments about my appearance, saying things like, "Kara, you look tired. Are you not sleeping well?" Or "That dress is brave." I couldn't pull off something so tight. She even told Robert once that I wasn't family yet because we didn't have kids. What hurt the most was that Robert would often brush it off or laugh, saying, "That's just how Melissa is." I tried to let it go for a long time. I didn't want to cause problems in Robert's family or make him feel like he had to choose between his sister and me. But it was hard, especially when Melissa would make these comments in front of other people. I started dreading family gatherings and would often make excuses not to go. Things really started to escalate when Robert and I bought our first house together. We were so excited about this milestone in our lives. We'd spent months looking at different places, finally finding a cozy 3-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood. It needed some work, but we saw it as a project we could do together. When we told Robert's family about the house, everyone seemed happy for us except Melissa. She immediately started asking questions about the price, the neighborhood, and why we'd chosen that particular house. She implied that I must have convinced Robert to choose a house she didn't approve of, saying things like, "Oh, Robert, I'm surprised you went for something so quaint. I always thought you'd want something more modern." Every time Melissa came over to our new house, she'd make backhanded comments. She'd say things like, "Well, I suppose you can always renovate later when you have more money," or "This wallpaper is certainly unique. Did you choose it, Kara?" She even started criticizing our finances, implying that Robert was wasting money by being with me. She'd say things like, "Robert, remember when you used to talk about buying a sports car? I guess those dreams are on hold now, huh?" These comments really started to get to me. I felt like I couldn't do anything right in Melissa's eyes. I tried talking to Robert about it, but he'd always downplay it, saying Melissa was just being protective or that she didn't mean any harm. It was frustrating because I felt like he wasn't seeing how much her behavior was affecting me. The situation got even worse when Robert and I started talking about having kids. We'd been married for a couple of years at this point and felt ready to start a family. We weren't telling many people yet, just discussing it between ourselves. Somehow, Melissa found out, probably through Robert, who still told her everything. Melissa wasn't happy about this at all. She started making weird comments to Robert about how I was trying to trap him into starting a family. She'd say things like, "Are you sure you're ready for kids, Robert? Once you have them, your life will never be the same." Or she'd make pointed remarks about how expensive children are, always with the implication that I was only with Robert for his money. One day, out of nowhere, Melissa told Robert that she was worried I was just using him. She said she'd heard things about me from mutual friends, implying that I was cheating on him. Robert laughed it off at first, but when I confronted Melissa about it, she acted like I was being paranoid and overreacting. She said she was just looking out for her brother and that if I had nothing to hide, I shouldn't be so defensive. This really shook me. I couldn't believe Melissa would stoop so low as to accuse me of cheating. What was worse was that Robert, while he didn't fully believe her, started acting a bit strange. He'd ask me odd questions like, "Where were you last Thursday?" Or "Why didn't you tell me you were going out with your coworkers?" It felt like Melissa had planted a seed of doubt in his mind, and it was starting to grow. I finally reached my breaking point at the family dinner. Melissa had been making her usual snide comments throughout the evening, and I couldn't take it anymore. I confronted her, telling her she needed to stop meddling in our marriage. I told her that if she didn't back off, we'd have to cut her out of our lives. Melissa, of course, acted innocent. She said she was just looking out for her brother and didn't mean any harm. She played the victim, acting as if I was attacking her for no reason. What hurt the most was that Robert didn't stand up for me the way I hoped he would. He said I was being too aggressive and that Melissa just had a strong personality. I left that dinner feeling angry and alone. I felt like I was fighting a losing battle against Melissa, and I wasn't sure if Robert was really on my side. I knew something had to change, but I wasn't sure what to do next. Update 1: After my confrontation with Melissa at the family dinner, things seemed to calm down for a couple of weeks. Robert and I tried to go back to our normal routine, but there was an underlying tension that we both felt. I was still hurt that Robert hadn't fully stood up for me, and I think he was feeling torn between his loyalty to his sister and his commitment to our marriage. During this time, I threw myself into work, trying to distract myself from the family drama. I had recently started a new project at my job as a marketing coordinator, which involved a lot of collaboration with different teams. One of my main collaborators was a coworker named Mike. We often had to meet for lunch to discuss project details and strategies. One evening, about 2 weeks after the confrontation, Robert came home from work looking really upset. As soon as he walked in, I could tell something was wrong. He was quiet and avoided eye contact with me. When I asked him what was going on, he hesitated before telling me that Melissa had called him earlier that day. According to Robert, Melissa had told him she had proof that I was cheating on him. My heart started racing as soon as he said this. I couldn't believe Melissa would go this far. Robert went on to explain that when he asked to see this supposed proof, Melissa sent over some photos. With shaking hands, Robert showed me his phone. On it were several blurry pictures of me and Mike having lunch at a local restaurant. The photos were clearly taken from a distance, probably with a phone camera. They showed Mike and me sitting at a table, talking and laughing. To anyone who didn't know the context, I could see how it might look suspicious. I felt a mix of emotions: anger at Melissa for her underhanded tactics, hurt that Robert seemed to be questioning me, and fear that this could seriously damage our marriage. I took a deep breath and calmly explained to Robert that Mike was nothing more than a colleague. I told him about the project we were working on and why we often had lunch meetings. Robert seemed relieved but still uneasy. He admitted that he hadn't really believed I was cheating, but seeing the photos had shaken him. We spent the next hour talking through everything: my work, my relationship with my coworkers, and how Melissa's actions were affecting us. After our talk, I decided that this was the last straw. I told Robert that we needed to set firm boundaries with Melissa. If she couldn't respect our marriage and continue to try to come between us, we would have to cut her off. Robert agreed, albeit reluctantly. I could see that he was struggling with the idea of confronting his sister, who he had looked up to for so long. A few days later, we went to Robert's parents' house for a family dinner. Melissa was there, acting as if nothing had happened. Throughout the meal, she kept making little digs at me. She asked why we hadn't made any real plans to start a family yet, implying that I was holding Robert back. She also made comments about some new clothes I was wearing, asking if I was spending all of Robert's hard-earned money. I tried to keep my cool, but when Melissa started talking about how some people aren't cut out for marriage and family life, while looking pointedly at me, I snapped. I told her to stop, right there at the dinner table. Melissa acted shocked and offended, as if she had no idea what she'd done wrong. Robert's parents tried to smooth things over, saying that Melissa was just being protective of her brother. After dinner, I pulled Robert aside and told him that if he didn't talk to his sister, I would. He finally agreed and asked to speak to Melissa privately. I didn't hear their conversation, but I could tell from the raised voices that it wasn't going well. When they came back, Melissa looked furious. She accused me of manipulating Robert and turning him against his family. Then she stormed out of the house. Robert was visibly shaken after this confrontation. He told me that Melissa had refused to acknowledge that she'd done anything wrong. She insisted that she was just looking out for him and that I was the one causing problems in the family. That night, as we drove home, Robert and I had a long talk about what had happened. He admitted that he had always found it hard to stand up to Melissa because she had been like a second mother to him growing up. But he also said he understood now how her behavior was threatening our marriage. We agreed that we needed to take some time away from Melissa and the rest of Robert's family to focus on our relationship. The next few weeks were difficult. Melissa kept trying to contact Robert, alternating between angry messages accusing him of abandoning his family and tearful apologies saying she missed him. Robert's parents called a few times, urging us to make peace with Melissa. But we stood firm in our decision to maintain our distance. During this time, Robert and I focused on strengthening our relationship. We started seeing a couples therapist to work through some of the issues that Melissa's interference had brought up. We also made an effort to spend more quality time together, rekindling the connection that had brought us together in the first place. As challenging as this period was, I felt like Robert and I were finally on the same page. For the first time since we'd gotten married, I felt like we were truly partners, facing our problems together instead of letting outside influences come between us. Update 2. For a few months after setting boundaries with Melissa, things seemed to settle down. Robert and I were doing better than ever. We had been attending couples therapy regularly, which helped us improve our communication and strengthen our bond. We even started seriously planning for our future, including discussing when we might start trying for a baby. Robert was still in minimal contact with Melissa, mainly through group texts with the family or at unavoidable family gatherings. These interactions were civil but distant. I could tell it was hard for Robert, but he was committed to maintaining the boundaries we had set. I thought we were finally moving past all the drama with Melissa. But I was wrong. One afternoon, while we were having a quiet Sunday at home, Robert got a message from Melissa. He looked troubled as he read it, and when I asked what was wrong, he showed me the phone. Melissa had sent a long message saying she had discovered something important that Robert needed to know about me. She claimed she had been looking through my social media accounts and found a photo from several years ago where I was tagged at an event with an ex-boyfriend. In her message, Melissa implied that I was still in contact with his ex and that I had been hiding it from Robert. She wrote things like, "I'm worried Kara isn't being honest with you and you deserve to know the truth about who you're married to." The photo in question was from a charity event I had attended with my ex-boyfriend, Tom, about a year before I even met Robert. Tom and I had remained friends on social media after our breakup, but we hadn't spoken or interacted in years. I had completely forgotten about the photo. When Robert confronted me about the message, I lost my temper. I was furious that Melissa was still trying to cause problems in our marriage, and I was hurt that Robert seemed to be giving her accusations any credence. We had a huge argument, our voices getting louder as our emotions ran high. I told Robert the first couldn't believe he was letting Melissa get into his head again after everything we'd been through. I explained about the photo, my past relationship with Tom, and how I hadn't had any contact with him since before I met Robert. I was upset that I even had to explain this, feeling like I was being put on trial for something that happened years ago. Robert seemed torn. On one hand, he said he trusted me, but on the other, he admitted that Melissa's constant insinuations had planted seeds of doubt. This admission hurt me deeply. I felt like no matter what I did, Melissa would always find a way to come between us. In the heat of the moment, I told Robert that if he didn't finally cut Melissa off completely, our marriage might not survive. I couldn't live with this constant interference and manipulation from his sister. I was tired of always being on the defensive, always having to prove myself. Robert was clearly struggling with the idea of cutting off his sister entirely. He had already distanced himself from her, but the thought of blocking her completely was hard for him. We spent hours talking it through, with Robert expressing his guilt and fear of losing his family, and me explaining how Melissa's behavior was eroding my trust in our relationship. Finally, after seeing how upset I was and realizing how much damage Melissa's actions were causing, Robert made a decision. He blocked Melissa's number on his phone and removed her from all his social media accounts. It was a difficult moment for him, and I could see the pain in his eyes as he did it. That night, we sat together in silence for a long time, both processing what had just happened. I felt relieved but also sad that it had come to this. Robert was quiet, and I knew he was dealing with a mix of emotions, relief, guilt, and grief for the relationship he used to have with his sister. The next day, we decided to take a short trip together, just the two of us. We needed some time away from everything to reconnect and heal. As we drove to a nearby beach town, we talked more openly than we had in months. We discussed our fears, our hopes for the future, and how we could move forward together without letting Melissa's toxic influence affect us anymore. Update 3. It's been 6 months since Robert cut off contact with Melissa. Our marriage is in a much better place now, but it took a lot of work to get here. We've continued with our couples therapy, which has been incredibly helpful in processing everything that happened and strengthening our communication. Robert still struggles with feelings of guilt sometimes. Cutting off his sister was one of the hardest things he's ever done, and there are days when I can see it weighing on him. We talk about it openly when these feelings come up, and I do my best to support him through it. At the same time, he's come to understand that it was necessary for our marriage and our mental health. Melissa hasn't reached out directly since Robert blocked her, but we've heard through other family members that she's been spreading lies about us. She's told people that I forced Robert to cut off his family, that I'm controlling him, and that our marriage is in trouble. Some family members believe her, while others have reached out to us to get our side of the story. Dealing with the family fallout has been challenging. Robert's parents are upset about the situation and have tried to mediate, but we've had to maintain firm boundaries with them as well. We've explained our side of the story to those who have asked, but we've also made it clear that we're not interested in engaging in family drama or gossip. Despite the difficulties, I don't regret standing up for myself and our marriage. It was necessary to protect what Robert and I have built together. That said, it's hard not to feel a sense of loss. I had always hoped for a good relationship with my in-laws, especially my sister-in-law, but now that seems impossible. Robert and I are focusing on moving forward and building our life together. We've started making plans for the future again, including revisiting the idea of starting a family. We're both excited about this new chapter, but we're also proceeding cautiously, making sure we're on solid ground before taking such a big step. We've also been working on expanding our social circle. We've joined a local community group and have been making new friends who don't have any connection to the family drama we've been through. It's been refreshing to build relationships with people who know us only as we are now, without any preconceived notions or past baggage. In terms of our careers, we've both been throwing ourselves into our work. Robert recently got a promotion at his job, and I've taken on some new responsibilities in my role. We're both finding that our improved communication at home has translated into better performance at work. While things are much better now, we're not naive enough to think that all our problems are solved forever. We know that maintaining a healthy relationship takes ongoing effort and communication. We're committed to continuing our therapy sessions and to always being honest with each other about our feelings and concerns. As for Melissa, we're done with her toxic behavior. We've accepted that we may never have a healthy relationship with her, and we're okay with that. Our priority is our marriage and our future together. We're moving forward, focusing on building the life we want without letting her negativity hold us back. It's been a difficult journey, but I believe Robert and I have come out stronger for it. We've learned a lot about ourselves, each other, and what we're willing to fight for. While I wish things could have turned out differently with Melissa and the rest of Robert's family, I'm proud of the steps we've taken to protect our relationship. We're looking forward to whatever the future holds, facing it together as a united team.